Establishing vocational skills programs after conflict or natural disaster, what's so special? I'm Karina Veal, and that's the question we're looking at today. This short video will just introduce a couple of the concepts, and then there's another couple of videos following which unpack them a little bit further. Now, some people suggest that there's nothing particularly special about re-establishing social services in societies post-conflict, post-disaster. They'll say the same sorts of rules of public policy, of establishing services exist, and it's just that the context is more complicated or different. Others acknowledge that everything is very different in a post-conflict, post-disaster setting, and that very different situations necessitate completely different approaches, perhaps starting from a more organic approach where the context completely drives and shapes the development. Both answers, to my mind, are correct. I think that there are, that whilst the context is extremely difficult and different, we mustn't forget some of the basic good concepts that underpin good vocational training. Now, what we find in a country post-conflict or post-disaster, there's no single answer to that question. It will, of course, depend upon the nature of the conflict, the nature of the disaster, and the extent of the conflict and the extent of disaster. Do we find sudden devastation after a major earthquake or tsunami, or do we find incremental negative development, as smouldering civil war is often called, where things have been left alone, perhaps disintegrated gently, where people have drifted away, but there's no sudden event. So there's no single answer to that. But what we do know is that to establish quality, relevant vocational training in any country or any setting, there are a number of threshold issues that we ought to consider. For example, the conditions of the labour market, to ascertain that there's opportunities for future employment and income generation, the educational levels, the existing school levels, and the future aspirations of individual trainees and potential trainees, the relevance and capacity of TVET institutions for the formal education and training, and perhaps for NGOs or community organisations for the non-formal vocational training, and fourthly, the capacity of the enabling environment to get the policy settings right, to get the budgetary and the implementation settings right. These threshold issues, if you like, are ones which can guide our approach to developing vocational training in post-conflict, post-disaster settings. And in the following videos, we'll look at each of those in a little bit more detail. Now, nobody would suggest that rebuilding skills development in communities affected by conflict or disaster is an easy task. But sharing information and experiences can lighten the load. Thank you for watching.